You ever notice how religion's got everybody nervous? Yeah, because deep down people know it's a club. A big, expensive guilt trip club. You're not born into faith. No, you get recruited. They get you young when you're still afraid of the dark and they say, "Hey kid, there's an invisible man in the sky. He loves you, but if you screw up, he'll burn you forever." And the kid says, "Wow, sounds like a great deal, sign me up." Now, don't get me wrong. People are free to believe what they want. You want to pray to God, Buddha, or a toaster? Go ahead, knock yourself out. But don't hand me the toaster manual and tell me it's the absolute truth. Every religion's got a book, and every book says that we're right and everyone else is wrong. You notice the pattern? They can't all be right. Somebody's got to be selling the wrong warranty plan. And the best part, religion's tax-free. These guys rake in billions without paying a dime. You got poor people scraping pennies to feed their kids, and the preacher's up there with gold rings, a private jet, and a message from God that just happens to say, "Keep sending money." Convenient, isn't it? God doesn't talk to starving kids, but he sure spends a lot of time on the phone with televangelists. Look, you don't need a middleman in a robe to tell you how to live. You already know right from wrong. Don't kill people, don't steal, don't lie. Pretty simple stuff. You don't need a burning bush or a talking snake to figure it out. You just need a little common sense, and maybe the courage to laugh at the nonsense they've been selling you for centuries, Doc. You ever notice the first thing religion does is go after the kids? They don't wait until you're grown up, educated, and skeptical. No. They want you when you're 4, when you still believe in Santa Claus, the Tooth Fairy, and that your parents actually know what they're doing. That's when they slide in and say, "Hey, kid, there's an invisible man watching you all the time. He loves you, but if you don't behave, he's gonna fry your little butt forever." What a sales pitch, huh? It's the ultimate carrot and stick. Eternal paradise if you obey, eternal torture if you don't. Fear and control, the oldest trick in the book. And by the book, I mean literally the book they shove in your face. And it's not just any fear. It's customized fear. They know what gets you. When you're young, you're scared of the dark of monsters under the bed. So religion steps in and says, "Forget the monsters under the bed. We've got a real one, and he lives under the universe. He's invisible, he's everywhere, and he's keeping notes. He's basically Santa Claus with anger management issues." And people eat it up because when you're a kid, you'll believe anything if an adult says it with enough authority. By the time you're old enough to question, it's already buried deep in your brain. The fear has become part of your wiring. If you start doubting, the guilt kicks in. They've already told you, doubt is sin. Questioning is rebellion. So now you've got people walking around, terrified not just of living wrong, but even of thinking wrong. That's how powerful the conditioning is. It polices your own mind. You don't need handcuffs when the prisoner keeps himself locked up. You can see how effective it is by looking at how long it's lasted. Thousands of years, generation after generation, kings, priests, popes, imams, rabbis, all are milking the same system. Why? Because fear works. People don't change their minds easily when you tell them their soul is on the line. If you can convince someone their eternal fate depends on obedience, you can get them to do just about anything. Work harder, pay more, kill strangers, bow down to authority. Fear makes people manageable, predictable, compliant. It's the best political technology ever invented. And don't think it stops with childhood. No, they keep reinforcing it your whole life. When you're an adult, the fear just gets an upgrade. Now it's not just hell. It's Judgment Day, purgatory, karma, curses, whatever your tradition cooked up to keep you on edge. If you're poor and suffering, they tell you, this is your test, your trial. Just be patient, obey. And your reward is coming later. Notice how the reward is always later. Not today, not tomorrow, after you die. Real convenient. No refunds, no evidence, no complaints department. Just a vague promise you can't check until it's too late. And while you're waiting for that heavenly payout, who's benefiting in the meantime? The church, the temple, the mosque, the institution. They're collecting your time, your money, your loyalty, your silence. They teach you to fear hell, but really you're just afraid of disappointing the system. You're afraid of standing out, of being the black sheep, of losing your community. Fear of isolation is just as strong as fear of fire. That's why they keep you in groups, chanting the same prayers, repeating the same phrases. If you repeat something often enough, it becomes part of you. That's not spirituality. That's programming. Think about the obsession with sin. Every religion's got its list of things you can't do, can't think, can't touch, can't say. Sin is the leash. It doesn't matter if the rule makes sense. In fact, the less sense it makes, the better, because then you're proving obedience, not logic. Don't eat this food, don't wear this fabric, don't have sex this way, don't speak these words. Why? Because God said so. That's the answer. End of discussion. And if you ask too many questions, suddenly, you're the problem. You're the heretic, the blasphemer, the one who's putting the whole community in danger of divine punishment. See how it works? They make you fear not only for yourself, but for everyone else. That way, the community polices itself. No need for enforcers when your neighbors are just as scared as you are. Fear doesn't just control behavior. It controls imagination. It tells you what you're allowed to dream, what you're allowed to hope for. If your deepest wishes don't line up with the script, you're told to feel ashamed. Ambition, greed, love, lust, doubt, rebellion, happiness. Dangerous unless it's the approved kind. Religion takes your natural instincts, curiosity, desire, creativity, and flips them into potential crimes. It turns the human spirit into a suspect under constant interrogation. And people wonder why guilt runs so deep in religious cultures. It's not an accident, it's a feature, not a bug. The biggest fear of all, of course, is death, the ultimate unknown. Religion saw that fear coming a mile away and said, "Relax, we've got the answers." Death isn't the end, it's just the beginning. Sign here, pay here, and you're covered for eternity. They turned death into a subscription plan. They took the scariest thing in life and monopolized it. Because if they can control your fear of death, they control your life. And they've done it brilliantly. People live their whole lives preparing for the next one, never stopping to enjoy the one they've got. Fear of losing eternity makes them waste the only time they know they have for sure. That's the cruelest trick of all. The truth is, fear and control have always been the business model. And don't think the leaders don't know it. They're not stupid. They know exactly how this works. They stand up there with their solemn faces and holy robes, but behind closed doors, they're just people with bank accounts, investments, and real estate portfolios. They know fear keeps the machine running and they're not about to turn it off. Why would they? It's too profitable. And here's the kicker. Once fear has done its job long enough, people defend it themselves. They don't even need the priest anymore. You criticize their religion and they'll get angry at you, not at the system that's been exploiting them. That's how deep the conditioning runs. The slave defends the chains because he's been taught the chains are holy. That's not faith, that's fear wearing a halo. You ever notice how the people who run religion are never broke? Somehow the folks who speak for God always end up with the best suits, the nicest houses, the fattest wallets. Isn't that amazing? God works in mysterious ways, but apparently those ways involve private jets and tax-free mansions. You don't see holy men carpooling or clipping coupons. No. They've got Rolexes, silk robes, gold-plated altars, and followers who can barely pay rent. Religion figured out a long time ago that faith is the easiest thing to monetize. You can't measure it, you can't prove it, and you can't return it. It's the perfect product. Think about it. They're selling you promises about something you can't see, can't touch, can't verify. You hand them money today for a reward they tell you you'll get after you die. That's the ultimate scam. No receipts, no guarantees, no refunds. Imagine any other business running like that. If a car dealer told you, "Just give me your life savings now. When you die, you'll have the best car in heaven," you'd laugh him out of town. But when a priest says, "Give me 10% of your paycheck, and when you die, you'll get a mansion in paradise," people line up at the door. And they don't just give once. They keep giving week after week, year after year. It's a subscription service with no cancellation policy. And where does all that money go? You think it goes to the poor? Please. A tiny fraction trickles down to charity, just enough to make a good photo op. The rest goes into the institution. The cathedrals, the megachurches, the shiny new buildings, the TV studios. Religion is one of the biggest businesses in the world, and it doesn't even pay taxes. That's right, they preach about sacrifice while living completely tax-free. You've got single moms getting hammered by bills, small businesses drowning in debt, and these guys float above it all, claiming special status because they serve God. What a racket. If God's the landlord, these guys are the property managers skimming off the top. And it's not just about money. It's about power, political power. You see priests, imams, and preachers cozying up to presidents, kings, and dictators. Why? Because they know that controlling belief means controlling behavior. If you can convince a person that disobeying you means disobeying God, you don't need soldiers or police. You've got ready-made obedience. Governments love religion because it keeps people quiet. Be poor, be humble, be obedient, because your reward is waiting later. Don't question the king, don't question the boss. Don't question the system. Just pray harder. You ever wonder why kings were always crowned in churches? It wasn't for decoration. It was a deal. The crown gets the authority, the church gets the loyalty, and the people get screwed. Then look how religion invests its money. They're not building affordable housing. They're not fixing schools. They're not feeding the hungry. They're buying land, stocks, art, jewels. The Vatican has enough gold to end world hunger 10 times over, but they keep it locked up while telling starving kids to pray for bread. Televangelists build multi-million-dollar studios to broadcast 24/7 pleas for donation. They tell viewers, if you send us money, God will bless you. You ever notice God's blessings always seem to arrive in the form of more cash for the preacher? Funny how God always tells them, not you, where the money should go. And the techniques they use, masterful. They don't just beg. They guilt you, they pressure you, they make you feel like giving is proof of your faith. They tell you that God sees what's in your wallet. They parade the donation plate right in front of you, and you don't want to look cheap in front of your neighbors, so you cough it up. They promise a seed money returns. Give to the church, and God will multiply it. It's a holy pyramid scheme. And if you don't give, they imply you're ungrateful, selfish, or even cursed. Brilliant marketing. They've weaponized generosity. And then there's the exploitation of tragedy. When disaster strikes, when war breaks out, when people are suffering, that's prime fundraising time. They swoop in with cameras, show you crying children, and say, send us your money so we can help. You send it and sure, maybe a few blankets and bags of rice get handed out, but most of it cycles back into the machine. The suffering of the world is just content for their fundraising campaigns. Pain becomes profit. Death becomes a revenue stream. Meanwhile, the leaders live like royalty. You think the Pope's flying economy? You think the televangelist mansion has a leaky roof? These guys are living it up while telling you to embrace humility. They wear $1,000 robes and sit on golden thrones while quoting a guy who, if you believe the story, wore rags and got crucified for speaking against corrupt leaders. The irony is thicker than the walls of a cathedral. They tell you to renounce worldly possessions while sitting on billions. They tell you money is the root of evil right before they pass the basket. And nobody blinks. Nobody says, wait a second. Why is the messenger richer than the message? You want to see real proof? Look at the megachurch pastors. They've got fleets of cars, bodyguards, mansions the size of small towns. They justify it by saying, God wants us to prosper. They're prospering off the sweat and desperation of their flock. They tell poor people to give until it hurts, while they themselves never skip a luxury. If that's prosperity, it looks a lot like theft dressed up in scripture. The genius of it all is that they've convinced people not to see it. They say, don't question the church, don't question the pastor, he's a man of God. They wrap themselves in holy language to dodge accountability. If a politician steals, people get angry. If a businessman cheats, people call it corruption. But if a priest does it, people say, who are we to question God's plan? They've made themselves untouchable. They hide behind the sacred while pocketing the profits. It's the oldest hustle in history. Turn faith into currency. Convince people that handing over their money isn't just generosity, it's salvation. Make them believe that obedience equals holiness, and that sacrifice equals blessing. It's not just a business, it's the best business. No product, no overhead, no risk. Just words, rituals, and promises of eternity. And as long as people are afraid, desperate, or hopeful, the machine keeps turning. The church doors stay open, the collection plates stay full, and the leaders stay rich. People like to say without religion, we'd have no morals. Really? That's the pitch. You mean to tell me the only thing stopping you from robbing a bank or stabbing your neighbor is that an invisible man is keeping score? If that's true, you're not moral, you're housebroken. You're just behaving because you're scared of punishment, like a dog who doesn't pee on the carpet because it remembers the rolled-up newspaper. That's not morality. The truth is, people knew how to behave long before religion. You don't need 10 commandments carved into stone to figure out that killing each other is bad for the neighborhood. You don't need a burning bush to understand that stealing your buddy's goat is going to cause problems. Humans figured out basic cooperation way before priests and preachers showed up. You think cavemen survived by constantly murdering each other? No. They learned, hey, if I don't bash this guy's skull in, maybe he'll help me hunt tomorrow. That's morality. Practical, common sense morality. Treat others decently so society doesn't collapse, but religion hijacked it. They took the natural instincts of empathy, kindness, cooperation, and slapped their label on it. This isn't just human decency, folks. This is divine law. Suddenly, being good wasn't about making life better here and now. It was about scoring points for the afterlife. Do the right thing, not because it makes sense, but because God is watching. It turns morality into a surveillance system. You're not helping your neighbor because it's the right thing to do. You're helping him because you're afraid of hell. That's not goodness. That's self-interest wrapped in holy paper. And the rules? Don't get me started. You look at religious immorality and half of it isn't even moral. Don't work on Sunday. Don't eat pork. Don't wear 2 kinds of fabric. Don't say certain words. Don't draw a picture. These aren't moral guidelines. They're superstitions. Meanwhile, the really important stuff, like I don't exploit the poor, I don't start wars, I don't molest kids, somehow gets ignored or explained away. Priests can wag their finger about somebody having sex before marriage. But when it comes to corruption, violence, and abuse inside their own walls, suddenly it's all very complicated. Funny how that works. If religion was the source of morality, you'd expect the holiest people to be the most decent, right? But history shows the opposite. Look at the Crusades, the Inquisitions, the witch hunts, the jihads. Rivers of blood spilled in the name of God. Holy men blessing soldiers before they go off to slaughter. Religious leaders justifying slavery, segregation, child labor. They weren't exactly on the front lines of morality, were they? More like the cheerleaders of cruelty, as long as it served their agenda. But hey, they did it all while quoting scripture, so it must have been okay, right? What makes people decent isn't fear of punishment or hope of reward. It's empathy. It's the ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes and say, I wouldn't want this done to me, so I won't do it to them. That's morality. That's the real deal. You don't need angels and demons whispering in your ear. You just need the ability to care. And you don't need a church to teach that. Kids know it instinctively. Watch 2 toddlers playing. If one takes the other's toy and the second one cries, the first one often feels bad and gives it back. That's not divine intervention. That's human nature. That's human nature. Religion, on the other hand, loves to complicate morality. They turn it into a list of do's and don'ts that often have nothing to do with kindness or harm. You can be a cruel, selfish, greedy person, but if you follow the rituals, you're considered a righteous. Meanwhile, you can be the kindest, most generous atheist on the planet, but they'll tell you you're doomed to hell because you didn't say the right prayers. That's not morality. That's tribal loyalty. It's about who's in the club and who's out, not about who's actually living a good life. And look at how religion weaponizes guilt. Everything natural becomes suspicious. Desire, sin, curiosity, dangerous, doubt, rebellion, they turn normal human impulses into moral crimes. You're not just judged for what you do, but for what you think, what you feel, what you dream about. Thought crimes, all under the banner of morality. And people grow up carrying this invisible burden of shame, constantly afraid they're not good enough for God's impossible standards. It's a brilliant system for control, but it's lousy for actual moral growth. Real morality doesn't come from fear, it comes from freedom. The freedom to choose kindness when you could choose cruelty. The freedom to be honest when lying might be easier. The freedom to care for others not because you're terrified of eternal damnation, but because it feels right. That's what makes morality meaningful. Choice. If you're only doing good because you're scared of hell, then you're not a good person. You're just a coward who doesn't want to get caught. True morality means doing the right thing even when there's no divine scoreboard, no invisible referee blowing the whistle. And you know what? A lot of non-religious people live by that. Atheists, agnostics, secular humanists. They do good without expecting heavenly rewards. They donate to charities, volunteer, raise families, help strangers, not because someone threatened them with fire, but because they actually give a damn. That's real morality, stripped of superstition. Religion likes to pretend it has a monopoly on ethics, but the evidence says otherwise. The prisons aren't overflowing with atheists. In fact, some of the most peaceful, least religious countries are also the most ethical. Meanwhile, some of the most religious places are drowning in violence and corruption. So much for divine morality. The irony is religion often corrupts morality instead of protecting it. Once you convince people that God approves of something, they'll do the most horrible acts with a clear conscience. Kill the heretic? Fine, God says so. Stone the adulterer. Sure, it's in the book. Shun the outcast. Silence the doubter. Shame the victim. All stamped with divine approval. Religion doesn't just fail at morality. It hijacks it, twists it, and uses it as a weapon. And people think they're doing good while they're actually doing harm. That's the real danger of tying morality to faith. The bottom line is simple. Morality isn't handed down from the sky. It rises up from the ground, from the way humans live together, from the need to cooperate, to care, to survive. You don't need priests and commandments to figure out that kindness works better than cruelty. All you need is a little empathy, a little compassion, and the guts to trust your own conscience instead of outsourcing it to someone in a robe. So when you strip it all down, what do you really see? Fear, money, and control. That's the holy trinity of organized religion. They scare you as a kid, they milk you as an adult, and they call it morality while they laugh all the way to the bank. And the saddest part is people already know how to live decent lives without any of it. You don't need a sky cop with a clipboard to tell you not to be an asshole. You don't need a priest with his hand in your pocket to explain kindness. You don't need commandments carved in stone to understand compassion. Compassion. What you need is the guts to think for yourself. To care about people because it makes sense right here, right now. Not because you're hoping for brownie points in the afterlife. Religion's been running the same hustle for centuries, but the joke's on them because the moment people stop being afraid, stop being fooled, and start trusting their own humanity, the whole show collapses. And maybe then, for the first time, we'll actually be free.